All right, happy people. Despite all the difficulties, we're here. So, Lynda, you are joining us from St. Louis. So
Yes.
you've come the furthest, and you also have our device. So I'll let you get us started tonight, okay?
All right. That
Are you
sounds
really?
good.
Yeah, are you really in St. Louis?
I am really in St. Louis. I'm here for a VA conference this week. So,
Oh, cool.
so I thought maybe I was the only one with the problem because I was in a different time zone, but
Nah.
surprise, everybody's having the issue, I guess. Well, I want to share a little bit about my personal journey over the last year. Since being at THQ, I have been on what I would call a painful journey, but a necessary one. Most of my officership for 21 years has been on the field. And when we went to DHQ in 2017, I mourned core life. I think every officer that leaves the field mourns in some way the core life. It was all I knew, and I struggled with losing my people, with my congregation. But we were in Maryland, West Virginia, and if you know anything about that division before it consolidated, it was small, and every officer worked about 50 different jobs to get everything done because there wasn't a great big staff. So, it was very fast paced, and I didn't have a lot of downtime then, much like being in the field. And then we came to THQ, and my experience has been quite different. I'm siloed. I'm finding a little bit more in my department, and I love that our job is mission and ministry driven. I love that I don't have to worry about making payroll and doing all the HR stuff and community engagement, but what I've realized after 25 years of officership is that I've been missing the real joy of a relationship with the Lord. I've been going and going for so long that it became natural for me to think, well, God understands. I'm about his business. So, over the last several months, I've been learning how to fall in love with God again. And I'm learning how to let him have first place in my life. And it seems that at every turn, God is confirming this for me. He speaks to me a lot through music. It's how I hear him most clearly. And part of my devotions today, as I've been in and out of the airport and the hotel and juggling my schedule this week and then preparing for my oldest son's college graduation at the end of the week, is a reminder to slow down, to remember what's most important. Chris Renzema, I don't know if you've heard of him. He's a Christian artist, and he has a song entitled "You're the Only One." And I won't play it today, but if you'd have the time, you should Google him and listen to his song. Excuse me. I put it on repeat today, and as a reminder that he has first place. He's over everything, over all of the busyness, over everything that the world tells me is most important. Even when I put ministry ahead of my relationship with the Lord, he's it. He's number one. And the lyrics are very simple. It says, though the earth may try to satisfy my heart, though the earth may try to tell me that you're not faithful, though the earth may try to blind me from your goodness, you shine through. You're the only one who fills me up. And it's just such an important reminder to me. And as I am learning more about who I am and what my relationship with the Lord looks like. It seems weird for me at 48 years old to be discovering this journey, but I'm excited that I have this opportunity. This group is a part of that growth journey for me, and I'm thankful for the opportunity to be a part of this. And I just know that the Lord orchestrates things with a purpose in mind. And even when I don't see it and when I don't understand it, I know that he is God. I know that he is faithful, and I trust him. So I just share this with you as a part of my learning and my daily devotion, and hope that it speaks to you, and in some way God ministers to you through this. But I hope that if you join me in prayer just before we begin our time together. Father, I do thank you for the opportunity that we have to be in this group tonight, though it may be small. Lord, I am thankful for each one of us that are here. I pray for those who are not here for whatever reason. I know that their life goes on, and we completely get that. Lord, as life does go on, I just pray that you keep us Christ-centered, that you keep us focused on you, on what's most important. Help us not to take the small things for granted, and see what we think are the big and most important things for what they are as well. Lord, you are so good to us, and we thank you for all of it. And I just pray tonight that you would bless our conversation, that you would help us to grow and to be closer to you through all that is said and done. And we pray this in your holy and precious name. Amen.
Well, thank you. Thank you. All right. Well, we'll start with Brad. There's only two of you presenting, so this is pretty easy. And Lynda, obviously, I'll be handling your week in the absence of Josh, not Josh, but
Thomas.
Thomas. Yes, I'm
Yes.
sorry.
No,
Yeah.
you're fine.
Yeah. Yeah, Josh was supposed to do Barry. That's what it was. Okay. Anyway, so Brad, go ahead and please present.
Do you want the French or the English version?
Well, I was actually hoping for the Lithuanian, but let's stick with the English.
Okay, your dime. Thanks for wearing the Trust Bradley hat. I appreciate that. For God's Sake, by Bradley Caldwell. He restores my soul. He guides me in the paths of righteousness for his namesake. Psalm 23, verse 3. Have you ever asked yourself just what is a sake? I did so when reading this verse from the most popular of the Psalms and disturbed myself by drawing a blank. Surely I fretted. I cannot have read this word hundreds of times over multiple decades without assurance of its intent. My trusty dictionary yielded two solid one-word definitions: purpose and benefit. After procuring this descriptive insight, I pondered further, how is a sake's purpose or benefit established, generally speaking? William Shakespeare's Hamlet urged his audience, to thine own self be true. Prioritize one's own interests to the exclusion of any authoritative influences or objective mandates that conflict with your personal vision. To paraphrase, look out for your own sake first and most. This mindset leads to a taking mentality. You take what you can get. You take out your competition in an exterminating sense. You take a lover rather than commit to a courtship. Contrarily, you refuse to take criticism from those who differ with your perspective. Charles Taylor, author of A Secular Age, asserts that an objective sake exists outside of and above all people, but finds them beholden to it. To shut out demands emanating beyond the self is precisely to suppress the conditions of significance, and hence to court trivialization. In other words, if each person lives for his own sake, we cannot hope to distinguish if anyone's purpose renders a valuable outcome for society. Sake, Taylor believes, must be measured against a higher sake standard before it can testify to offering a legitimate benefit. Skeptics question this narrow assessment. They reject the concept of a single life purpose, a dominant sake that surpasses all competitors. But without an independent standard for what makes one's specific interests laudable or significant, the quest for authenticity collapses under the weight of groundless detachment. A hidden awareness of this objective and higher sake lurks in an expression of exasperation. When a person dwells obsessively and unceasingly upon his own interests, a vexed captive of this monologue might call for silence by exclaiming, "Oh, for God's sake," or "For heaven's sake." Even if this outburst includes no legitimate appeal to deity, it does suggest that anyone who monopolizes conversation with his isolated concerns must consider a greater framework for existence. For God's sake also implies that this perceived framework for life is not generic, but good. No one evokes action taken for Satan's sake or for hell's sake. A devil acts only for nefarious purposes, and the biblical lake of fire involves only punishment. A sake needs hope, growth, healing, and community. God himself references that his redemptive, restorative actions concern his namesake. In human terms, we might say that his reputation is on the line. More specifically, God's actions reinforce his trustworthiness. He responds to both King David's prayer and our contemporary seeking with helpful transformation. In the above quoted verse, King David declares that when we heed God's appointed norms for behavior and character, paths of righteousness, his directives somehow heal our distorted lives. They liberatingly orient us not to morality, but to God himself as embodying objective virtue. This means that a sinner's suffering lies less in prioritizing his own sake, his own ends, than in rejecting the sole trustworthy sake among sakes, which is God's. The Lord restores my soul rather than alters my behavior. He touches me because he values me, and he values me as one created by him to know and freely love him. He guides me cooperatively rather than manipulates me condescendingly. I can trust his interest in my life. Expressive individualism rejects the idea of any assigned meaning in life. As a basis for human character, this mindset rejects conformity and praises striking out in one's preferred direction, even when that direction has no intended destination, no viable sake. The expressive individualist insists, "My soul needs no restoration. I journey willfully in the fog, hoping to introduce me to myself."
Okay. Mike, you have the critique on this, so please proceed.
Rip away.
Well, this is not unusual for a piece of work written by Mr. Caldwell to contain a variety of concepts and thoughts that are so
Warped.
intellectual, challenging and so forth. But also I like the fact that you in some ways chose to discuss this relatively you pulled this thing out of Psalm 23:3, this one word that your whole doctrinal statement here is all about. Very interesting. So anyway, again, I have yet to discover how to do the editing thing on my new software. So I haven't done the commas, paragraphs, dots, and that kind of thing as much. I've done more about the thought processes and the terminology as I understood them and read through them. So maybe much of this would be discussion rather than Alan would be specific on what needs to be corrected for grammar and other sake. But anyway, I like the fact that you wondered what a sake was. At first, I was thinking of the word sake. When I was thinking, oh, look, he's been visiting Japan, and what's that got to do with what's that got to do with this? Then I fell back into line. Okay, so the way you put reading this verse from the most popular of the Psalms, a way to put it. I don't know if it's the easiest way. You almost have to argue, but it is definitely one of the best known Psalms. No question about that. Disturb myself. There we go. On we march. My trusty dictionary, you went to the book and found some terminology. And how is a sake's purpose or benefit established? So you pondered further. I'm in the second paragraph. I thank you for rewriting. I don't know how many, everybody got the second model, right? That was a little easier to break down and discuss.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that to thine own self be true would be interpreted with the kind of depth meaning you gave it. Prioritizing one's own interest to the exclusion of any authoritative influences or objective mandates that conflict with personal vision. I understand where you're going a little bit. To paraphrase, look out for your own sake first and most, and then the potential interpretation there, meaning the taking mentality, you take what you can get, your competition in an exterminating sense. Well, that sounds like you want to win at the cost of death of the others. You take a lover rather than commit. You refuse to take criticism from those. Contrarily, again, probably very much a word that I would count on you to choose and select. And again, when we look at these things, in some part, we're having to represent a audience. Is this sixth graders? Is this a congregation, the average congregation in the 9th Street core in downtown Washington, D.C.?
Yeah.
So you're definitely, I think, speaking to a group of people who are very familiar with large vocabularies and a lot of independent thinking and thought. Charles Taylor, third paragraph, asserts that an objective sake exists. We go down 4 sentences. A higher sake, sake has to be measured against a higher sake standard before it can testify to offering a legitimate benefit. And all right, I just put a little question mark there. When a person dwells obsessively, this is the next paragraph, obsessively and unceasingly on his own interests. So we're back to the concept, to thine own self be true. Some people are true to themselves without having given a whole lot of thought to their opinion, right? They just sort of express it. So this dwelling obsessively and unceasingly sounds like someone has given a lot of thought to their opinion, whatever it might be. A vexed captive of this monologue might call for silence by saying the things that you've expressed, for God's sake, for heaven's sake. Even if this outburst includes no legitimate appeal to deity, and frequently it doesn't when I've heard them said in the past, it does suggest that anyone who monopolizes conversation with his isolated concerns must consider a greater framework for existence. Yeah, no, I kind of wish that might be true to some degree. I grew up hearing a lot of theological terms in my house, but they weren't used theologically.
Yeah.
And so I would think this phrase might also be, meant and taken and used occasionally in that manner. For God's sake implies his perceived framework is not generic, for life is not generic, but good. No one evokes action taken for Satan's sake and so forth. Okay. So somehow we're tying in God's sake as a positive, as opposed to a negative, the devil's sake and so on. A sake needs hope, growth, healing, and community. I wondered if that sentence about the devil in there. You're touching on it later, and you have a good closing paragraph. But when you say no one evokes action taken for Satan's sake or for hell's sake, then you bothered to add a definition of what a devil does and how he does it, but you haven't done that for God anywhere earlier that I see it. So I just wonder if that was really an unnecessary. You could very easily eliminate that whole thing about what the devil does and move on to the sake, needing hope, growth, healing, and so forth. Just a thought. God himself references his redemptive restorative actions concern his name's sake. Okay. Next paragraph, his directives heal our distorted lives. Healing's one word. And guide, direct, etc. There's a couple things that might also be relevant. Not to morality, but to God himself as embodying objective virtue. The word objective makes me question, because objective would seem to indicate some sort of measuring that is outside the framework of absolute truth. And of course, God is God, and his way of doing it would be very concrete instead of, I don't know. It's just a thought with that particular word.
Maybe the word absolute.
Oh boy, now that would nail it.
Okay.
With virtue and so forth. I think that would be a much clearer concept.
Okay.
I like
thanks.
I like the next paragraph, and I would have preferred it to be the end of your essay. The Lord restores my soul rather than alters my behavior. He touches me because he values me. He values me as one created by him, et cetera, et cetera. Now, you started this thing with a scripture verse, and you got into a quandary that you've been trying to resolve. But this particular thing concludes it nicely.
Yeah, I think that would be a fine place to stop.
With
The
who the
last
Lord.
paragraph was just some interesting
Further comments, yeah.
Yeah.
And maybe we're changing place with them to continue to help you continue your thoughts would have been okay. But I do like that particular paragraph as a conclusion, as opposed to the next to the last paragraph. So those are the kind of comments I've got.
Okay.
As upon the second and third reading of the idea and the concepts presented.
Lynda, you got anything you want to share?
I think it was very well written.
Okay. Well, Brad, just a couple of things. I think the point that Mike makes is a good one. Is
Riding above the audience.
No,
No?
I don't. I think it's helpful to know who were you envisioning to be your audience? I mean, if you have somebody in mind, this might be perfect. But
yeah,
you're talking about like Mike said, I think it's a very good example of the people who are attending the
Yeah.
the average core, opening up one of our publications. I'd say they'd struggle a bit with this.
Yeah. Yeah.
So who would you have in mind to read this?
Just some young adult officers and college kids I interact with.
Okay, that's fine, and there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
And if that's the case, then how do we find an avenue for you to get this published, and have it where they can see it?
Yeah.
And that's the question. And that may be, then you might be looking at some sort of online type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Rather than a paper type publication
Yeah.
or whatever. Because I don't think there's anything wrong. I mean, it's kind of, forgive me, but it's kind of quirky type writing. And
Mhm.
there's actually people who really like that. And
Yeah.
it's built a following, where, you do a lot of wordplay and stuff, and that's good. I mean, again, and you love wordplay. And again, it's for people. I think again, Mike did a very good critique of this. I want to say that to you, Mike, a very good critique
Yeah.
of this. And it really, but again, it's just it's not just for one of these things we throw out there to the whosoever. I think we have to
Yeah.
look. Okay, if we're looking at a college age group, or we're looking at, again, people who have some, again, some college education and so on and so forth. If that's what we're looking at, this is fine. All right. Or people enjoy this kind of thing, want to be stretched a little bit, want to think about taking a word like sake and just, you used to, like you used to do with Play-Doh, you take it and you move it around, you twist it around and you stretch
Yeah.
it. Or silly putty is really more what I'm thinking about. Silly putty, you stretch it, you put a ball, you bounce it around. That's kind of what you did with the word sake. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with that at all. In fact, it's kind of good to do. And you twist it, or you might think about it. Another way to think of it is like taking a diamond and you twist it and you turn around to the different facets and you see the different, how the light hits it.
Yeah.
And somewhat you've done that. Now, I do agree somewhat with what Mike was saying too on the second paragraph, to thine own self be true. It's a bit of a stretch to pull those applications out of that Shakespeare quote about I can get out, prioritizing one's own interest to the exclusion of any authoritative influence. I don't know that that's what Hamlet was saying. Maybe he was. I don't know, but I can't remember the context of that from Hamlet. Anyway, I just can't remember. You might be
Sure.
now those applications you draw, I have no problem with that. I just don't know if that's the right quote to pull them from.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, I can look that again.
Or you might find another quote that works to prove, the support you can pull that from.
Mhm.
Okay. I don't know. Those are all, I agree that is certainly a viewpoint. But I'm just not sure that that's the quote to use to draw.
Yeah, I'm not looking to insist on Shakespeare, but it just was one that I remembered, and
Yeah.
his character tends to act that way and to his own demise.
And again, it may be that that's perfectly all right. I just don't remember the context. Okay. And there it is. The other thing I was thinking, halfway down the third paragraph, where you say skeptics, I would make that a new paragraph. Because you start really a new thought. Skeptics question this narrow assessment.
Yeah, I had it broken apart originally, and then I thought, well, it's kind of flowing in the same vein, but yeah, that's fine.
That's just what I would do.
Yep.
I don't have as much problem as Mike did with the for God's, for Satan's sake. I really kind of think that's a legitimate thing of again, turning that diamond to another, way to let the light hit it. I'm okay with that. And really, for God's sake, or for heaven's sake, you could make an argument that, as crude as it is a type of prayer. And people may not realize it, but it is a crude prayer. And even though people do it wrongly, I understand what Mike's saying. People say it for the wrong reasons, and I agree 100% with what he's saying. But it is, in a sense, I remember Billy Graham talking about once that about Khrushchev, when he heard that his sister died, he said, "Oh my God!" And Billy Graham said, "As crude as it was, that was a prayer from an atheist." And that's in the same kind of vein as this. So I think you could maybe you could expand that a little bit to make that point.
Okay.
That's
a note.
I think you're on the right track there. Okay. And I had never thought about, you don't ever hear people say for Satan's sake or for hell's sake. You don't hear that. And I think that was an interesting little thing. I said, no, that never occurred to me. And then this really, the heart of this comes in those next three paragraphs about going back to the 23rd Psalm, really is where you're coming back to, for his name's sake. Beautifully done there. That brings back this whole devotional thought. And I agree also with Mike. Mike, I'm saying this a whole lot tonight. That last paragraph is just ruins it. I just think it doesn't belong.
Yeah.
You start taking us off to another direction, and it's a dead end road. I journey willfully in the fog, hoping to introduce me to myself, and you leave us in the fog. So I think that if you're going to use that kind of thing, that paragraph may go back up to where you're talking about this other stuff way back in,
Sure.
back up here about where that Shakespeare paragraph.
Yeah.
That might fit over there because it goes with that kind of thinking that you're developing. But it doesn't belong at the end because it leaves us kind of like, what?
Yeah.
And you had this beautiful devotional thought. And it really is a beautiful devotional thought. And that leaves us with a sense of hope. But then this last paragraph.
Yeah, point taken. I'm in full agreement. This group is increasing my sensitivity to that kind of flow of. So I really appreciate that.
Well, it's one of the hardest things in writing, and I will say for most of us, and I found it myself, is over the years, is finding something, a misplaced paragraph, that this paragraph I wrote here really belongs 2 pages before. It's in the wrong place. And it's not necessarily a bad paragraph. Or I wrote a beautiful paragraph, and as I'm reading it, I say, as much as I hate to do this, I have to cut that paragraph. It doesn't matter how wonderfully it's written, it just doesn't fit.
Yeah.
Just doesn't fit. And even though I think the words are absolutely inspired, it doesn't go with the flow. So the flow is important.
Yeah.
And again, you established a wonderful flow. You build us up really wonderfully well here. You were taking us somewhere here. And then that last paragraph, I know you agree with it. You just took us off the rails with that.
Yeah.
So anyway, but this is really good. I wish I could tell you right now where to take this. You might consider one of the college publications somehow.
Okay.
And I know you're I know that the seminary in Jackson, I can't remember the name of it. Wesleyan, yeah, the Wesley Seminary. I don't know if they have a publication. You got Andy Miller over there who's got the Strong Army connections and so on.
Sure.
If they have a publication, of course, they're going very strong with the Global Methodist Church, and I know you're going to be having your own close connection with them in the future. I just think it's kind of it feeds the mind and the soul at the same time. So I recommend you give that a little more work and then maybe try to send it somewhere.
Okay.
Yeah. So pat you on the head if I could do that. Pat.
Kind of greasy.
Yeah. And Mike, for your part, I have to say that is the best critique you've done so far. I mean, you've done, and critiques take time too to learn how to do. They really do. And that by far, I thought that was the most, that's the best critique you've done so far. So I tip my hat to you. Good for you, man. All right, Lynda, you're the next one up because you're the last one up.
All right. Well, mine is a bit more lighthearted take. I spent a little bit of time on the phone with my middle son, and we are huge football fans. So I figured let's roll with it and see what happens. So my paper is entitled Football Stomach. Many may not be aware, but there is a correlation between college football and major gastric issues. Let me explain. 25 years ago, I married Chris Thornhill, knowing he was a graduate of the University of Alabama. That was my extent of understanding football. Every Saturday in the fall, Chris faithfully watched the SEC network. Not just the Bama game, but all the games. I couldn't understand why he wanted to watch all of them. He watched Bama, and that should have been enough. Several years into our marriage, I realized that if I wanted to spend any time with Chris on Saturday, that I would have to show an interest in football. So I began asking questions. What's a quarterback? What happens if they don't get the third down? Why are there only 4 teams in the playoffs in a 5-conference system? That question took a while to answer. Week after week, I would watch football games with Chris, but I never truly understood the game until Chris took me to Tuscaloosa for the first time, along with our boys, Chase and Caleb. That was when I, along with our youngest son, Caleb, were hooked. Chase, on the other hand, decided on the trombone. Gone were the days of me waiting for Chris to turn the game on. Saturday morning at 9 a.m., I turned on game day so I could size up the competition. I watched all the games to make sure I knew what our team was up against. There were good seasons and not so good seasons, but I was faithful to Bama. As I evolved in my love for college football, I developed what is now known in our family as football stomach. Play after play, game after game, I became more and more enthralled when in 2007, we entered what is known as the era of Saban. Every Saturday, I was on the edge before game time, and I couldn't eat. And on the rare occasion we didn't get the W, I knew exactly how to coach the coach. By 2017, football stomach was not just my issue. I had shared this intensity with our son Caleb. We were playing Georgia for the national title, and in the first half, they had our number. Caleb and I were sick with anxiety. We prayed all the prayers and sent all the mental notes to Coach Saban that we could think of. In a last-ditch effort, I made Chris leave the house. Chris, the actual graduate from Alabama, had to leave the house and watch the game from his phone in the Walmart parking lot. That game went on to be known for one of the most legendary plays that won Bama the Natty, 2nd and 26. As I reflect on my love for football, I can't think of a time where Chris actually invited me to watch a game with him. His love for the game and my love for him influenced me, and over time, I was transformed. While this may be a silly example, this is how influence works. From football to relationships to spiritual things. When we're passionate about something, others tend to take notice, and we want to be a part. Every day, I have the power of influence. Will I influence others positively by showing the love of Christ in all circumstances? Or will others see my frustration with my children, my impatience in the grocery line, and my gossip of others? It's easy to forget that we have influence on others just by the way we live our lives. 2 Corinthians 5:20 says, "We are Christ's ambassadors, as though God were making his appeal through us." Many people never step inside a chapel or open a Bible, but they see me. And what others think about God has a lot to do with me. I pray that all I say and do are a reflection of Christ that leads others to him. And just for the naysayers that don't support Bama football stomach, remember, Jesus bled crimson for us all. Roll Tide.
Okay.
Very polarizing, and I know it's not one that everybody wants to hear, but
Well, I'm a Bama fan, so I don't mind it.
right.
Okay. All right. Any thoughts about this before I say something?
I just had one little teeny tiny thought, and it's so inconsequential, I would not mention it, except that for me, it was a moment where you said your other son preferred the trombone.
Yes.
And there wasn't quite enough context for me to get what you were saying there. It was understood that you were saying something about, but I just kind of stopped there. And what? And you had already gone on. So it was just, if you're going to mention it, just maybe another phrase or two of explanation so that it doesn't become a side road that doesn't lead somewhere for the reader.
I thought the same thing. Thank you.
Anything
I
else?
like, I like hearing the devotional, hearing it as a thought that was introduced character and salt and light, and without using the terminology. Modern study says a lot of people aren't going to church because they've met people who go to church.
Hmm.
And instead of the other way around saying, oh man, look at those great church people, they embrace us, they take us in and whatever. Instead they say, oh man, I don't who wants to be in, like that.
Right.
So the whole context was good. And I think the journey with your teenagers and yourself was a legitimate one, um, that a lot of people can relate to. Well done.
And that old saying, don't tell me, show me, was very
Mhm.
much on display here.
Right.
Yeah.
Really enjoyed that.
Thank you.
Well, there's a number of grammatical things. I'm not going to really bore you with those right now. Did you run this through editor before you?
I did, but I was, as I was doing it, I was finishing it up yesterday and packing and getting
Oh
everything done.
yeah,
So I
yeah.
probably didn't give as much attention to it as I probably should have.
Yeah, you just need to watch some things with that. So, there's but they're not much. They're not much. Okay. I'll just say that they're just kind of little nitpicky stuff that bother people like me. So, uh, you know, so, but again, it's not much. All right. I made it. Oh, yeah, it's not much. When I see it in the office, let me just take this in and I'll just kind of point them out to you. Because
Absolutely.
I really liked this whole thing because now some people don't like football. You're gonna lose them. They don't want to read about football. But most people are kind of like my dear wife. I have tried, goodness knows, to influence her in a positive way toward the wonderful game of football. I have failed miserably. She did not have your positive attitude. I failed to make her make a dent of any sort. Every once in a while, she'll sit down with me, but it's a sad story. And I'll start crying. Anyway, so, but the thing is, so you have people like her who kind of understand the passion of it. So, all right,
Mhm.
who might read the article. Then you have, of course, football fans, and of course, people who hate Alabama, but you might be able to, get them in because they understand being a football fan. So, all right, there you have it. So you're gonna, of course, Bama fans, you got them. You got those people. They're in, man. They're in with both feet. So. But you can't worry about that because you're not gonna get anybody anyway for an article. Every article is not going to interest everybody. Like you start talking about sewing, okay,
Mhm.
you lost me. All right,
Yeah.
but you're going to get other people, and so
Right.
you just can't worry about it. The same thing with Brad's article. So, some people they get into the third paragraph or third sentence of Brad's article because it's not their cup of tea. Other people are going to love it and just going to say, "This is kind of fun reading this thing he's doing with sake and all that kind of stuff." So we just have to know we're not going to get everybody with every article, so that you can't let that worry you. You just go with that. And again, in all of this, when we're writing for the Lord, we trust the Holy Spirit to use our words, and we don't know who the Lord's going to use it for and what day. And people say, I can't believe I sat there and read something. I don't know if you ever had some where you read something, you said, I can't believe I read that, I remember once I read a whole article about horses. I don't even like horses, but it was well written, and I just read the whole article, and I said, I thought afterwards, when am I ever going to need this information? This is absolutely useless information to me. But it was a well-written article, and I read the article about horses. So, there it is. The thing is, what was really nice is when you made this nice transition about, I think that when I met Chris, actually invited me to watch a game with him. His love for the game, my love for him, influenced me, and over that I was transformed. There's where we made this nice. This is where we took this nice turn, and I wouldn't call it a silly example. I know what you say. I know this is kind of trivial compared to talking about things of eternity, um, but I would just take that little phrase out, because that seems to downplay this, because the next phrase is really what's important. This is how influence works. Lynda, that is exactly how influence works. And that's your point. That's the whole point of this article. That's your theme. And from football to relationship to spiritual things. And then you go on to talk about the power of influence. It was really very well done with that. Again, I think I would like to see a little more said about influence here. I would say beef that part up a little bit more. 2 or 3 more sentences could be put in there. I would be careful, because some people might think it's trivializing a little bit to say Jesus bled crimson.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. I just say that some people might say, come on, that's a little bit too. I mean, I understand. We all got a little chuckle out of that.
It's
That's right.
blasphemy.
Yeah. Well, there's some people who might be a little bit offended by that.
Of course.
So, yeah. I mean, it's true, but certainly the University of Alabama never meant for it to be a religious symbol. So
You are correct.
yeah, they never meant for it to be. So I would just be careful. And I don't have a problem with the roll tide at the end. That's okay. That's kind of fun. So no problem with that. But yeah, and this is kind of a nice little wrap up at the end, a little sentence at the end. But just be careful about that little thing, because again, some people might say you're being a little too trivial with that. So I don't feel like it is, but I'm just saying, I know there are people who, I've said a couple things just kind of kidding, and people have said, you shouldn't have said that, and the Bible says, if my weaker brother's offended, then I won't eat meat. And
Right.
so we can't worry about, you're going to offend some people no matter what, but
Sure.
but if you know it's going to be offensive, you try to avoid it. So you just have to be careful with that. So you have any questions, Lynda?
I when you say the last sentence, I debated on whether or not putting that last sentence in there anyway. But when you say expounding on the influence, do you mean a little bit more on the scriptural side of things, or do you think maybe some practical application of? I think I've given a lot of practical application in my story, but
Well, you have, but I think you can. I guess what I'm saying is, you've given some nice application here. But I'm just saying it might be, gosh, let me try to give you an example. By the way we live our lives, and you say that, and rather than put a negative thing, many people may never step foot inside a chapel or open a Bible, but you may say instead, before a person will step into a chapel or open a Bible, they will see us first.
Sure.
So rather than say they never will, maybe
We're the gateway.
Yeah,
Right.
we're the gateway,
Okay.
and like we're the doorway, and so on. Yeah, we are and I would say maybe something about that a little more.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got it.
And again, when you go back, you might think of another thing or two to say, but it's really quite good as it is. So, And again, for this one, I think this is worth doing something with. If nothing else, I do this weekly thing where I do the worldwide prayer meeting. I do something to consider, and that's small circulation, but if nothing else, I'd love to use it for that. But if you
Sure.
think of something else, let me know. And I'd like to think about it. This is kind of like the last thing, because just a few hundred people see that. Well,
Mhm.
actually about 2,000 or 3,000 people see it, but how many read it, I don't know. But
Right.
there might be other places to put this. So for now, let's just say that's the last stop for this. If we
Okay.
hopefully maybe find something else where we can put this, because this is something kind of fun, and also I think you can work with this. And Mike,
Okay.
I told you to send me your thing last time, and you never sent it to me.
The rewrite of the last,
Yeah.
well, I can try that.
Okay.
I'll make
Because
note of it.
I was looking for that.
Okay.
All right. That wasn't just being nice to you.
All
All
right.
right. Okay. All right. Well, anything else anybody has before we say goodnight to each other?
Just thank you for
Well,
making this happen again and again.
Yeah,
It's,
amen.
it's humbling and educational and formative, and it's good fellowship.
It
I
is.
appreciate it.
Yes.
Well,
You'll send the instructions of the next what's going on again
yeah,
at
we
some
don't
point?
do anything till September. And
Okay.
so you got a summer off, or I'll get you something out so you can be thinking about who's going to write and all that. So I get the fall schedule out probably when I send out the link for this video. Because Brad, I got the impression Anita was going to be able to join us again in September.
I don't know. I'll have to ask. She hadn't mentioned it to me recently, but if
Well,
she's talked to you about it, that might
she
be
had said
possible.
something she'd like to get back involved. And
Okay,
so would you just put a bug on her ear and see if she
I'll
could,
tap her on the shoulder about it.
yeah, would you please? Because I would like to have her back in. And she sounded like that by then she thought she might be settled enough to be able to join us
Hmm.
after you get in your new home. So,
Yep.
Okay, great. Well, y'all have a good night. And again, I'll put the link up for this after we're all done. Well, whenever. Okay. All right.
All right.
All right. See y'all
Perfect.
later.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Good
Good
night.
night.
Conference. Have a good
Good night.
night. Bye now.